Hi, I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Folks, we have some breaking news for you. This is an exclusive story from Juno News and the Candice Malcolm Show. We are reporting today that the CBC, the Canadian state broadcaster, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, has hired temporary foreign workers through its program. They have issued labor market impact assessments, which means that they are looking for people who fit a certain job, and when they can't find it, they can go ahead and hire temporary foreign workers. They have hired 20 of them, according to records and documents obtained by Juno News. This is really unbelievable, okay? You have the state broadcaster of Canada, the Canadian Broadcasting Corp, the organization that claims to speak for Canadians and represent Canadian culture and basically be Canada, right? And yet they are hiring foreigners. They are participating in this program, temporary foreign worker program, that places foreigners ahead of Canadians. This is really unbelievable. I'm going to walk you through it. So the most recent approval for a temporary foreign worker came in Q3 of 2024. This dates back over the past decades, but 20 people over the past decade have come through this temporary foreign worker program. And the individual jobs that they have hired for, I mean, it's absurd, folks. Computer programmers, computer network technicians, business management consultants, marketing research and consultants. You have announcers and broadcasters, broadcast technicians, web designers and developers, and interactive media developers. So the CBC, with a straight face, is claiming that they cannot find those people in Canada, that there are no people in the country that fit the description for their job, and therefore they have to go abroad and recruit foreigners to come and be broadcasters and announcers at the CBC, to be technicians, to do web design, to do web development. It is just patently false that you can't find those workers in Canada. I mean, look around. How many unemployed journalists are there in this country? How many people have been laid off from places like the CBC and the Toronto Star and other legacy media broadcast companies because the legacy media is dying because Canadians aren't tuning in, and yet they say that there's no Canadians that fill these jobs, and therefore they had to go through this scam program in our immigration system, the same scam program that is now letting in hundreds of thousands. Remember, we reported earlier this week that there was supposed to be a cap, and the Liberal government has already blown through the cap after just 6 months of data. The system is broken, and even the state broadcaster is partaking and taking advantage of this broken system. And to talk a bit more about this, I'm pleased to introduce Alexander Brown. Alexander has a show here at Juno News called Not Sorry. He's also the Director of Communications, the Director of the National Citizens Coalition. Alexander, thanks for joining the show. What do you think of our breaking news story here today?
Candice, you were right to call it a scam, because that is what it is. That is how we're seeing it, be used now. It is an excuse to suppress wages, to look for something very specific, sort of outside of the Canadian sort of normal job stream. Anyone from, now we know, CBC employees to bakers, butchers, certainly truck drivers, which we go into on my latest episode quite in an in-depth manner. Even those who worked on the temporary foreign worker program before 2015, with Jason Kenney, those key advisors, I've spoken with all of them, they were advising to abolish the program. Because they saw the trouble coming. They saw that companies were going to take advantage of this. They saw that the wrong government in power would let them. And now this is just completely out of control. And if the CBC if it were to even be sticking to its mandate as the Canadian public broadcaster, they shouldn't be hiring a single person using the temporary foreign worker program.
Well, 100%. There is no need to, right? Like, we run Juno News. We have a whole bunch of journalists, both on the True North side and the Juno News side. There's no reason to hire a foreigner. The news is based in Canada. The audience is Canadian. We deliver Canadian news. And we're not taking $1 billion+ a year from the taxpayers. I cannot imagine for a second why the Canadian Broadcasting Corp would need foreign workers. And you're right to point out that the writing has been on the wall with this temporary foreign worker program for forever, basically. Like, I don't understand why we need to import cheap temporary labor, right? It's one thing to say, hey, look, Canada wants to help grow the economy. We want to give people from around the world the opportunity to come to Canada legally, and we're going to pick the best and the brightest, and they can come and they can become Canadian. They can join the Canadian family, have Canadian citizenship. But the idea that we're going to just like temporarily bring people in to undercut the job market, to have cheap labor, and yes, it is being driven in large part by big corporations that just want cheap labor. I want to talk a little bit about these labor market impact assessments, because this is part of the scam, right? It's like you put out a fake job posting basically saying, oh, we're looking for this very specific, very niche position. And if you can't find it, then you get to turn around and get a temporary foreign worker for the CBC. It's interesting because in our data on these labor market impact assessments, it shows that these are high-wage jobs. These are high-wage jobs. That's how they're classified. High wages. This is all in Ontario. And so the idea that they couldn't find a broadcaster, they couldn't find a web developer in Ontario is just such a joke. And it underlines the idea that this LMIA, the Labor Market Impact Assessment Program, it's fake. It's just total nonsense.
It's the first step they're taking. Like there's this whole whisper network of how that's actually working out now. But it's like they cut right to it because you're offering $36 an hour for something very specific. There's something embedded in the job description that like doesn't quite, shouldn't actually be within the purview of what the role is. Right now, Michelle Rempel-Garner, who's the shadow minister on immigration, the immigration critic, is doing really great work where she's going to like kind of like the LMIA job bank, and she's just saying like, hey guys, these are the jobs that are, these folks have already gotten approved for to go out to the temporary foreign worker program. And it's just an astonishing range of $36 an hour, well-paying positions that we all know Canadians who would be well suited for and who are looking. The unemployment numbers are massive. Young men right now, it's 22%. Like that's worse than recessionary. Like that is CIBC put out a warning saying, these are recession numbers, but that's worse than that.
Well, and so what does it say for like the future generation, right? These are young men aged 15 to 24. And the fact that 1 in 4, 1 in 5 of them can't find a job that's looking, what's going to become of these young men? Sorry to cut you off.
No, at this point, this is like my entire raison d'etre for doing what I do. I'm so mad on their behalf. I have aged out of the young man demographic, but I see what's happening to them. They're failing to launch. You talk to these guys, you hear their stories about submitting, hundreds of resumes and it going nowhere. History is littered with lessons about idle young men. It doesn't go anywhere productive. And then we're going to turn around and go like, gee, like what's going on here? This is really, unhealthy, or these guys are really upset. Of course they are. They have no upward social mobility, and the government and corporate Canada are in on it.
Well, exactly. And so happy to see Pierre Poilievre speaking in Charlottetown PEI yesterday, talking about how Canada is expected to bring in a record number of temporary foreign workers this year. Let's play that clip.
As our young people have a quarter-century high in their unemployment, Mark Carney brings in, this year is expected to bring in a record number of temporary foreign workers to take the jobs of Canadian youth, driving down our kids' wages and their ability to earn a living. So while he drives up the cost of housing, preventing them from owning homes, he drives down their wages by allowing greedy multinational corporations to bring in low-wage foreign workers that take away Canadian jobs, including in high unemployment regions of this country.
Makes no sense. And so Pierre Poilievre, I think, hitting the right notes. What do you think, Alex?
All over it. He's all over it, and that team's all over it. And like, to pull back the curtain a little bit, like we all have sources, we all talk to people. They're going to be hitting it really hard in September with revised target numbers, specific stuff, not just a gee, this is broken. Friend Jeff Russ has a great piece in the National Post talking about, this renewed fight is coming this September. And it has to. Like I spent the summer calling for, with the National Citizens Coalition, responsible immigration numbers, press releases on, don't just buy Canadian, with all that elbows up fervor, and those are down now, but hire Canadian. And the Conservatives see these trends coming. They understand what their sort of modern coalition looks like with young people, and like, they have to stand up for them. We have to stand up for them because the Liberals aren't.
Well, that's 100% true, and I'm happy to see immigration breaking through, and I hope the Conservatives are able to push the needle on this issue and go hard because it's necessary and it's long overdue. I want to go back to the CBC because speaking of the National Post, I saw this story in the National Post on Tuesday, CBC is heading to court to fight an order to disclose subscriber numbers for GEM streaming service. This is a wild story. So for those who might not be aware, the CBC launched its own streaming service, like to rival Netflix and Amazon Prime for some reason. I have no idea why. And even though they're a public broadcaster, they get money from the taxpayer. They are here to provide a service to Canadians. They also want to charge you to stream their news network, their 24-hour cable news network. You have to pay $5.99 to do this. And then they also throw in a bunch of movies and series. And when you go onto the CBC GEM website, you'll see that the vast majority, Alex, like from my count, 8 out of the 10 shows that they're promoting were not Canadian, right? Like the whole idea is that they're promoting Canadian culture and Canadian arts. And yet, when you go ahead and you look at the shows that they are promoting here, Plan B, so that's the one Canadian show. I'm not familiar with this program.
I think I'll be skipping that one.
At all. Yeah, it's a Canadian series, but that's just the first one. You go through, Chateau DIY is a British UK show about, like, I don't know, flipping castles or something like that, fixing up castles. We have Boat Story, which is another British BBC mini series. Next, we have a show called Colin from Accounts, which is a TV series from Australia. We have a show called The Affair, which is a US show. I mean, you get where this is coming from, right? It's like why would Canadians pay a streaming service to watch American shows? The whole business model of it doesn't really make sense to me, Alex. But then on top of that, they refuse to disclose their numbers. So presumably it's a state broadcaster. It's become kind of commonplace for streaming companies to release their subscribers, like find out how many people are paying to subscribe, how many people are free subscribers. Let's see how it's doing, whether it's justified from a public perspective. And CBC have been fighting against this access to information request that has been put in by this University of Ottawa professor. So Matt Malone is an assistant professor at the University of Ottawa, and he has been making access to information because he just believes in public transparency. We have the right to know. The CBC is charging money from consumers while also charging taxpayers. So let's find out how many people are actually signing up for this program. The CBC is doing everything in their power to block them, to refuse. And so Matt Malone is taking them to court. Good for him. And saying, hey, you're the state broadcaster. You answer to us, the citizens and the taxpayer, have some transparency here. The fact that the CBC would go to court over this it's pretty telling, right? My guess is these numbers are pretty bad. What do you think?
I think we know why that, this is having to go to court too, is that they know that the numbers are terrible. Like I might become immediately ostracized from conservative circles for saying that, I think the CBC has some utility. But when it comes to scripted and international scripted, what the heck are we doing? At least the BBC, makes things with Benedict Cumberbatch and esteemed thespians. We're just getting the world's slop. And then we're turning around and going, no one's watching, and we don't want to tell them the numbers because they're grisly. And, Canadians are being robbed of their purchasing power because our money's worth less because we're wasting money on this stuff. Shout out to Juno News and your work. At the 6-month anniversary, you release all those great numbers. Look at all these great numbers we're doing. You're being, forthcoming. There's no subsidies here. We're reaching tens of millions of people, through the election. I'm sure those numbers were staggering. They know that if they actually, go to market, those subscribers are in the thousands, and the subsidies are in the billions.
It's really it's such a mismatch. And even just to add on to the waste, right? So we have a government agency that for some reason gets $1.4 billion a year from the taxpayers just to report the news, right? To your point, there are many, many free market organizations that will do that because they can find a profit, right? They're doing it without the subsidies. And in fact, the other way around, we pay taxes, right? Yeah. So, they're getting money that way. Then they're turning around and charging people $5.99 a month for the privilege of getting to watch CBC News World. Why isn't that just publicly available since we're already paying for it with our taxes? And then on top of that, Alex, they're going to go to court and use countless resources to defend themselves against an access to information request, which is part of the public disclosure process. So it should be, you should do it, right? But instead, they're going to spend, who knows, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars trying to block an attempt at transparency. It's just their hypocrisy knows no bounds.
We could have done the whole episode on this. I can tell you're fired up. Like, for example, like I'm the director of the National Citizens Coalition, and that is a nonprofit. And we make the absolute most, the goal is to make the absolute most of, impact and respecting donor dollars. Like I work from home. I limit my business travel. I'm in my my shoebox apartment in Vancouver right now. Like it's they fought tooth and nail to, not disclose, lavish executive bonuses too, because they know it looks bad. Whenever you open up the books and you're not above board and you're trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, like it's going to come out and it's going to look bad and it's not remotely relatable. And that darn service that might be useful to people during the Olympics because they get to keep up with Team Canada, the actual Team Canada, not the fake Liberal Team Canada. For that to be $5.99 is an insult. It should be free, but it shouldn't even be free because what are we doing? We could be saving billions of dollars.
100%. Okay, we've got a couple more examples of the ridiculous successes over at the CBC, but first a quick word from our sponsor. So the Trudeau government had laid the groundwork, but now with Mark Carney in charge, it feels like the government's getting bolder about deciding what we're allowed to see online. News stories disappear from social media, content gets blocked, and it's all framed as safety or regulations. We know too well about this, by the way, here at Juno News and the Candice Malcolm Show. Some of our best episodes from the election are no longer here. They just disappeared from YouTube, from Google searches. We know exactly why. They're usually the most damning stories about the Liberal government that happen to just disappear. Well, folks, that is why I use ExpressVPN. It lets me get around those blocks and access the internet like a free person, which I am. I was born free and I will die free. And it's not up to Ottawa to decide whether or not that's acceptable. Now, you can do the same thing. Head on over to CandiceMalcolm.com/ExpressVPN. It's CandiceMalcolm.com/ExpressVPN. Viewers of the Candice Malcolm Show get a special 3-month free when you sign up for a year. Go ahead and do that right now. Okay, Alex, the CBC keeps getting more and more expensive. And every time there's an election, it seems like the Liberal government just goes ahead and bids more money to the CBC. If Pierre Poilievre had won, I hope he would follow through on his promise to defund the CBC. I disagree with you. I don't think it serves a public purpose at all. Even the idea of, hitting, doing radio and servicing small communities, it doesn't really make sense anymore because of podcasters and people who go and do citizen journalism. Like I can tell a lot more about what's happening in a small town if there's an emergency or something like that, just going on Twitter or going on X, than paying the CBC to have a bureaucracy. $1.4 billion was spent on the state broadcaster in 2023-24. And our friends over at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation found out that there is a 65-page list of CBC employees who make over $100,000 a year. It is really, really unbelievable. There are over 200 people at the CBC who earn that high wage, including 180 managers, 277 senior managers, 124 directors, 106 senior directors, 28 executive producers. I don't think they know what an executive producer is because usually that's the lead producer. I don't know why you need 28 of those, but it goes on and on and on. There's just so much waste, and part of it, to your point, is that they're paying themselves ridiculous salaries and then they're giving themselves bonuses on top of that. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's also when you reading out that list, and first of all, it's very funny that they have their own sunshine list at this point. Like you could, it could be its own Toronto Sun giant thing, but it's as their managers, it's managerial bloat. It's these are the same issues that you hear from doctors, like in our healthcare sector, which is, it's like, oh, our employment in our hospital is growing, and it's like it's just middle management and administrators and another person on a keyboard with like a not particularly real job. That's not, we know we're not serving the public with that kind of growth, with that sort of bureaucratic growth. And particularly in the case of the state broadcaster, who benefits from 10 more executive producers at the CBC when half those people would be for daytime television that's, watched by, 10,000 moms, maybe. And it is directed towards advertisers who aren't even getting their dollars worth. And it's being subsidized by us at a time when all of our public services are underwater, like all of them. And our purchasing power is underwater. And so you can, right there, I knew I would get in trouble by saying, there's, part of the CBC, there should be some utility, or to me there is. But like, you can just cut that whole list. I'm okay with that. We can agree on that one.
Well, it is interesting that, you mentioned that there's like the added middle managers and sort of paper pushers at desks that have been added. And you're right, it happens basically in every bureaucracy. I mean, we saw this under the Trudeau government. I think it was that the bureaucracy doubled in size, or that they added 99,000 or 100,000 new positions in the federal bureaucracy. Like so many of those roles, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they're useful or not because, like you said, they're administrators. It happens in education as well, that you have just as many education bureaucrats as actual teachers. And so class sizes are getting bigger and parents are complaining about the diminishing educational standards, diminishing test scores. And instead of hiring more teachers and more educators, they're putting in more bureaucrats who are the ones that are pushing the woke, like DEI, ESG agenda. And so it's like, it's just such an easy call that these people can't, like, we have to stop doing this. We have to stop creating these jobs or make work programs for university grads that would otherwise be unemployed, I guess. And then, to make matters worse, the CBC is turning around and hiring foreign workers for some of these positions as well, which is outrageous.
It's outrageous. And like they are make work projects. Like this is the equivalent of like driving past that construction site where you never see anyone doing anything. And you see the sign that this was like contracted out to the government or Metrolinx or something. It's who is it really serving? Like we're just spinning our wheels and wasting our time with this stuff. And a lot of these managerial jobs, like especially with what's changing quickly in industries with AI, the role of AI, these people are just drone pilots for Grok and ChatGPT. Like they're not actually doing anything. And like you could a kid could do that for cheaper coming out of university who were actually trying to launch and were actually trying to build up their upward social mobility. There's no reason for that to be in a $100,000 position when there's already 20 of them at the company, and they're just moving letters and numbers, and they're not really even doing that themselves anymore.
Well, and it's so interesting too that like we had this story, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, that the private sector workforce in Canada is now made up, I think it's 20% of temporary foreign workers. And so when you just step back and you look at the Canadian workforce, right, we have this huge problem of youth unemployment, as we were discussing. We have a huge influx of temporary workers who don't really have a stake in our future, or at least by law they don't. I mean, maybe they want to transition to become permanent residents, but that's not the type of visa that they came to the country on. So the presumption is that they're going to leave eventually, which I don't know why you would even want that in your country, Alex. And then on top of that, you have all of this bloat and all of these kind of middleman. I mean, I wish that we had a more entrepreneurial sense in our country, that we had more people not in like a cushy job in the bureaucracy where they're just there for the pension and they're taking it easy and not working very hard. We could really benefit from more of this bright, well-educated, smart people going out there and starting jobs and being innovative and pushing the ball forward to grow our economy and create more opportunities for everybody. But instead, they kind of get like lured in to these like complacent positions in the economy. What do you think?
It really speaks to Canada's tall poppy syndrome, which is, oh, you're too successful. How dare you? Like we are putting in our own glass ceilings. Like people are seeing the chair that they can graduate into, and then they get there and then they just like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to block all these kids below me. I remember during the election, Tristan Hopper, writer for the National Post, made the analogy that like the Carney voters like pulled up the ladder. And then not only did they pull up the ladder, they like threw down a grenade. And that's what we're doing. Like it's there's supposed to be ladders to success. There's supposed to be avenues to explore and get into. That this country, I know that like there are some who now just view like the modern global economy as just some like a country's an economic zone. It's not. It's supposed to benefit these kids first, and that it isn't is just going to make them more upset, drive them into alienation, potential radicalization. It's like I see what would have happened to me. I come by this shared frustration honestly. Like I came out of university, I studied poli-sci. That wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. I needed to work on campaigns. I needed to work real jobs. I needed to figure it out. And a lot of those jobs were Joe jobs, gardening, pumping gas, telemarketing. Like, and I wouldn't even have had those now, which means I would have been at home. I would have been upset. I would have been spending too much time on the internet, and I would have been watching all these Canadian charts go in the wrong direction. And And now we're going to turn around and go like, gee, I can't believe, all these kids are supporting the conservatives, or gee, all these kids, are really going through it. And, we have mental health crises and you name it. And it's like, what did you expect? We're abandoning them wholesale. And corporate Canada and the Liberal government and all these lousy interests and even sort of not so conservative governments, just they aren't doing right by them. And they have to, and we have to be kind of pricks about this the next little while. Because, come September, it's if they try to get away with this, no.
Yeah, we're done with it. I feel that way too. It's like I'm done watching my country be destroyed by top-down sort of WEF interests, and I don't care, right? Like for so long they could sit there and say, oh, you're talking about immigration, therefore you're a racist, and I'm going to write you off. And for a while, conservatives were kind of flat-footed and maybe saying like, oh, okay, I guess we just shouldn't talk about immigration anymore. Well, that's over now. That's gone. You can't use that excuse because it's so self-evident to everyone in Canada, including people who themselves are foreign-born and immigrants who came to Canada legally. They can look around and see that the situation is broken and that it desperately needs fixing. Well, Alex, we always appreciate your time and insight. And everyone, go check out his show, Not Sorry. You're going to see a lot more of his pointed criticisms, especially on immigration. It's a great show. Alex, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Candice.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back again soon. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you and God bless.